Welcome to Keiser Voices, the story of success, brought to you by Keiser University Graduate School, here where the academic world meets personal triumph. Join us today as we dive into the captivating tales of success.
My name is Dr. Richard Mendelson, and I'm faculty in the Keiser University Graduate School in the Psychology Department. By training, I am an industrial and organizational psychologist. I've also have research interests that involve things like emotional intelligence, artificial intelligence, political maltreatment in the workplace. But today I'm here to discuss automation and artificial intelligence with you. There are some major questions that are going around right now about what type of impact AI or automation is going to have on the workforce in the coming years, and specifically the job market. The job market is going to change considerably. One of the biggest shifts is going to be that there's a lot of jobs that are right now held by human beings, obviously, that are going to be almost entirely eliminated, while other jobs that most people haven't even heard of at this point in time are going to become larger in terms of the numbers and the visibility of them to continue to keep our society moving forward and afloat. People are going to have to make some very difficult decisions. In the real world, you have to adapt or you stagnate. And the way that you adapt to a changing workforce is that you have to be willing to reskill yourself. You have to be willing to go out and pursue, different avenues in terms of your education or your work experience to be able to be more well suited for the different fields that are going to be arising, so that you don't lose your livelihood and your income if the field that you happen to work in does see a massive influx of the use of AI and automation. Not everybody is super keen on the use of AI or automation. Very recently, we've seen what we call the hot labor summer, which involved, I believe it began with the Writers Guild of America launching a strike. They were soon followed by Teamster unions. They were then followed by the Screen Actors Guild, a lot of different fields that went into strike mode because when their contracts were up, they realized that as far as their new contracts and the way that their field is governed, they absolutely needed to account for the fact that artificial intelligence and automation are here to stay. With the advent of things like ChatGPT, I'm sure most people who are familiar with that service can recognize why, if somebody is a writer, they're working on, like, say, a TV series, or, they're a screenwriter, they're working to generate scripts for movies that are feature length or shorts or anything like that. Well, when you have something like ChatGPT available, there's not really much that stops the studios and the decision makers from moving to kind of push the human writers out in favor of the use of artificial intelligence and automation. As a result, the Writers Guild of America went on strike, Screen Actors Guild went on strike, a whole bunch of other unions jumped on board. And although there were a number of issues that they were striking about, one of the hot button issues tended to be the use of artificial intelligence and technology in their field. Studios wanted to be able to use things like ChatGPT to generate scripts. They even went so far as to say, well, we want to be able to take footage we've already taken of actors and use automation and AI and technology to be able to use the voice of the actor, the likeness of the actor, to create movies with the footage they have from the actors already, without having to compensate the people who actually are the actors for the use of their likeness and for the use of their voice likeness. These things were hot button issues. They were resoundingly shut down by the Screen Actors Guild, by the Writers Guild of America. But that's just one type of example of a field in which we very much connect with people. I mean, it's not unusual for people to follow well-known writers or actors or even athletes on social media, to feel like, even though you've never met them, that you have an understanding of who they are and what they do. And when you're looking to remove that human aspect entirely from future projects, I think there's going to be, let's say, further resistance to decisions like that. But looking forward, there are going to be a number of different jobs that are kind of going to go the way of the chimney sweep. If you know what chimney sweeps are, back in the day, people had a job. They would go onto someone's roof and they would actually clean the chimney of the house. Then came the invention of the self-cleaning fire log, where a person can simply put a fire log in their fireplace and burn it, and the smoke from that fire log actually cleans the inside of the chimney. Now you no longer need a chimney sweep. So anyone who was working in that field, they had to either reskill or pursue different avenue of education because their field was vulnerable. There are a lot of vulnerable fields of employment when it comes to the use of artificial intelligence and automation. I mean, if we really think about it, we tend to think that a lot of like white collar professions, for example, people working in offices and things like that, that we can't do that with machines. The reality is, if you're working in, let's say, data analysis, data entry, even some fields of research, you can be automated because the speed at which you're able to perform your task is really limited by the fact that you are a human being. A machine, of course, has no such limitations. If you think of it, for example, back in the day, if someone wanted to go into the secretarial field, they would ask, well, what's your typing speed? How many words per minute can you type? Obviously, we have hands and fingers, we can type, but we're going to be limited by how fast our hands and fingers are able to move, right? Computers don't have such limitations. So when you're looking at fields that are going to move towards the use of AI, unfortunately, we're going to see a lot of fields where people tend to perform what we call rote tasks, kind of doing the same thing repeatedly over and over again. On the opposite side of the spectrum, some jobs that require less education, but perhaps more real world experience. One in particular, say, truck driving big rigs. In the post-COVID era, I think most people have come to realize how important jobs like that are to keeping our world moving and to keeping us, comfortable in our own homes. We kind of take for granted these days that we can go online and we can order just about anything on something like Amazon.com. We can have groceries delivered. We can do all of these different things, right, online. But someone, a human being at this point, actually has to take that product that we order, load it onto a truck, drive the truck, take it off the truck, and put it outside your front door, for you to receive it. Well, in the coming years, we're going to see shifts and changes in that. Truck driving in particular. Truck driving is one of the most heavily populated fields for high school educated males in this country. And automated trucks are already on the road. Several years back, Mercedes-Benz actually launched fully automated self-driving trucks to do all of their shipping, to move their vehicles from one place to another. And they did staff a human inside the truck in case, but the reality is the human being really didn't serve a purpose in there inside the cab of the truck anymore. We also now see regular cars that are driving themselves. Tesla has autopilot. There are other companies that they have cars that are almost entirely self-sufficient that don't need a human driver whatsoever. So when you look at some of the fields of employment that contribute to, shipping of goods, things like that, we're going to see a mass influx of automation, artificial intelligence. And the reason why is that over the long term, it will actually be more cost effective for the businesses. So say, for example, you own a fast food restaurant, and your fast food restaurant, let's say you staff, let's call it 20 people. And over the course of the year, you have to pay those people wages, you have to pay those people benefits. And at the end of that year, you've brought the money in from the product that you sold, and the human beings were the money out the door that you needed to spend in order to keep your business running. Well, if you could make a sizable investment one time and bring in automation to run your fast food restaurant, that initial investment will probably be substantial. However, it's going to, over time, be offset by the fact that you no longer have the human cost You no longer have to carry staff. You no longer have to pay their salary, provide benefits, potentially retirement, things like that. So businesses that have people who perform rote tasks, they're going to be looking at automating. I would say in the next, let's call it 5 to 10 years, you will see some fully automated places like fast food restaurants here in America. I know that already overseas in different parts of Asia, and I believe in Europe, they already have some of these restaurants fully open without human staff. The same thing with the banking industry. You're going to see fully automated bank branches, completely online banks, which we already have at this point. So it's not so hard to imagine that in the next few years, we're going to see some pretty respectable jobs that are going to go the way of the proverbial dodo bird. They will become extinct. Um, Office administration, things like that, where a computer simply can do it better. A computer can do it for longer periods of time without having to take breaks, without employers having to concern themselves about things like labor laws. So that brings us to the next thing, which is what fields are probably going to be the safest? If we're looking at going into school right now, to pursue higher education, to prepare ourselves for this shifting and changing economy, what different fields should we be exploring so that we know we have a bright future and we know that we have an opportunity to grow and develop within our professions, and also hopefully be able to be upwardly mobile in terms of our financial status? So the safest fields at this point appear to be those that hinge on humanity, that human exchange, that human interaction. Things like the medical field. Now, I know that in some cases, people are very quick to point out, well, we're already using robotic microsurgical platforms. We're already using high-level technology for scans and all these different things. You're 1,000,000% right. But what people need to account for is that there's an emotional experience when people go to visit their physician. There is an emotional experience when people are doing things like therapy. Therapists in particular, and I have to admit my bias as a psychology person, but therapists, their profession is to be able to view every human being with unconditional positive regard, and to be able to develop an understanding, a rapport, and perhaps even empathize with the challenges that their clients are experiencing. At this point, although there is artificial intelligence, we do not yet have any company boasting that their artificial intelligence is also emotionally intelligent. And it would be very challenging, if not impossible, for a company or any organization for that matter, to be able to generate something like that at this point. Because as human beings, our emotional quiver, if you will, where we keep our emotional arrows, our tools, our emotional toolbox, maybe is a better analogy, is filled through years of life experience, through years of experiencing the highest of highs, the lowest of lows, and every single emotional state and experience in between those. So for a computer or a software to be able to truly empathize or truly have an understanding of that human experience is at this point almost unfathomable. Now, there are groups that say their AI has what they call empathy engines, where it's predominantly algorithmic. It looks for keywords and then responds using words that would be more sensitive, if you will, if we heard them from a human being. But we also know as human beings, the connection that we feel with people is because they understand the emotional experience we're having at different times. We identify with athletes who reach the pinnacle of their sport and win an Olympic medal because perhaps we've trained or competed in a sport before. We go to see movies, or we read books, or we listen to music because of the way that the artists who contribute to those projects are able to use their instrument, whether it be their voice or their actual musical instrument or their athletic ability, or the human form as, say, like a dancer or even an actor, the way they can use their instrument to elicit an emotional response from the people who see, hear, or otherwise experience their art. Computers don't have that capacity at this time. So the fields that are going to be the safest probably for quite some time, fields like physicians, nurses, therapists, generally healthcare type professions because of the human interaction that's necessary. Um, in addition to that, you have fields that are going to require people to use their social and emotional intelligence. Um, Education, I know that there's a lot of different opinions on what should and shouldn't be taught in classrooms, um, what can be done for things like school safety and things like that. But I have yet to hear anybody make the argument that children or adult learners, whether you're talking about from a pedagogy or an andragogy stance, I've not yet heard anyone say that it would be a positive thing for people to be educated by anyone that's not a human being. Now, with that said, I know that there are some institutions right now that are actually running courses taught entirely by artificial intelligence, but we don't yet have any data to indicate that that is effective, certainly whether or not that is preferred by the students, and whether or not that's going to be effective and preferable across all different fields of education. What might work for, say, a software engineer program may not be the same thing that's going to be effective for phlebotomy or chiropractic. So education is in a bit of a state of flux, working to adapt to the tools that AI brings to the table and automation brings to the table, and also balance that with the logic, the common sense, and the reason that tells us education is very much about people connecting. So fields that involve that human connection are most likely the fields that are going to remain the safest over periods of time. And that leads us to what types of jobs are likely to emerge. Well, you're going to have a bunch of new sales positions. So if you are a sales professional right now, you really ought to bone up on your knowledge about these emerging technologies. Because from a business perspective, AI is a software, it's a product, and as such, it's going to be packaged and sold. They're going to need human beings to sell it. They're going to need to sell it to companies, to organizations. You're going to need people who are going to be able to connect with other decision makers who at this point are still human, and be able to convince them that, hey, this product we have is going to benefit your organization in these different ways, and it's going to translate to these different outcomes. Another emerging field is anything that's going to work within the realm of development of these technologies. Research scientists who specifically focus on use of AI, improving the technology behind AI, coders, people who are actually writing the code for artificial intelligence. And when you have what they call generative AI, and AI that is able to learn and absorb information as well as perform tasks, that AI over time is going to be learning, and it works to get to a point where the AI will be able to incorporate its experiences by generating its own new code. And that gets into what they call the black box of artificial intelligence, which is the theoretical stance that at some point the AI will become so wise, so knowledgeable, that it will be able to propel itself forward by writing its own code. Whether or not that has happened at this point, I haven't been made aware of anyone who claims that it has, but that is something that is potentially on the horizon. Other fields that are going to emerge: business analysts. We are going to need an enormous number of business analysts to be able to determine what the real impact is of automation, of artificial intelligence on a host of different fields. So you're going to be looking at performance metrics of just about every organization, from pre-AI adoption post AI adoption, and then on a monthly, annually, or biannually type of basis as time passes, to be able to identify emerging trends in the data. And those emerging trends will enable people who are running those businesses to make more intelligent decisions about how their business should move forward with the use of AI. Machine learning supervisors. I mean, machine learning is a bit different. It's machine learning, it deals more with deep data analytics, computers taking massive data sets, being able to discern those trends that I was talking about a moment ago, and even perhaps make recommendations about how to potentially move forward. You're going to need data engineers, anything that's going to include the use of human interaction or an understanding of the human experience is going to be a blossoming field that human beings can still be employed in. Now, that brings us to the point of how do we prepare ourselves? How do we adapt? It's easy to say, oh, well, learn a new skill, or oh, just follow your path and find another field for education or something. I think that what we're really seeing is that people are going to need to go back to school. They may not necessarily be going to college or graduate school, but trade school, things like that, learning how to keep things running. Again, in a post-COVID world, I think we've all realized that, frankly, a lot of the fields that, had a not so positive stigma about them are really the fields that keep us running. Things that people might have looked down on before as perhaps not being as important to society. We all need to be able to purchase food, which means we need people staffing and working in grocery stores. We all need to have working plumbing in our homes, so we need plumbers. We need electricity. We need electricians. We need homes to live in. That means we need contractors, carpenters, builders, HVAC professionals. So learning a skill, going back to school, those are two of the most important things that people can be doing to prepare themselves. But you can't just throw a dart at the board and say, oh, whatever it hits, that's what I'm going to study. You need to think about whether or not the field that you're going into has a bright future, or if perhaps automation is going to decrease the opportunities in that field. The recommendations that are coming out right now is that people should focus on anything in the computer or tech-related fields, focusing on human-centered fields in medicine, as I said earlier, education, anywhere that AI might be restricted, despite its advantages over human beings, simply due to human preference, whether or not a human being is comfortable being operated on by software, as opposed to having a human surgeon in the room. Those types of decisions will eventually have to be made. And you can continue to build upon the different skills that you have at present, and work to develop your own niche in terms of how you are going to position yourself so that when your field is taken over by AI, or perhaps not taken over, perhaps AI comes in and starts to serve some functions or roles, helping people to adapt, consulting on how to properly train the remaining or existing staff in terms of how to interact with the use of AI, that's going to be an effective field to get into as well. Learning how to work effectively as a team through distance modalities, that's a field that people are going to definitely need help in. We have, again, learned that through the COVID pandemic. Leadership is not the same skill set in a distance modality as it is in a traditional brick and mortar workplace. So nurturing the leadership skills that you're going to need to work effectively through distance, that's something that people are going to have a tremendous need for as we move more towards this distance workplace, looking at, like, say, what we in IO, we call the gig economy, people working on remote project-based, tasks over periods of time, when, you may have team members living in multiple continents, but we're all working together to accomplish a single task. So with all these changes on the horizon, the question then becomes, can we look at something like automation? Can we look at something like AI? And can we sit back and think, well, is this going to have a positive impact on humans in the workplace? Are we going to look at it and say we're more or less satisfied with the jobs that we do, with how productive we are? And if so, how is that going to happen? What's it going to look like, right? So there is an initial mistake that a lot of people tend to make, and it does tend to be generational. So I think that one of the things that we're seeing now is that people are looking at this strictly as if it's going to impact the workplace. That is not the case. What we're really looking at here, we're looking at a massive paradigm shift within our entire global workforce culture. I mean, the enormity of this, it can't be overstated enough. I mean, this is akin to the Industrial Revolution, right? I mean, what we're really looking at is a complete shift. Because at this point, you know, people, many aspects of who we are tend to hinge on what we do. So this monumental cultural shift is going to impact people's finances, work-life balance, and the balance of power that currently exists between employees and employers. Because for many, many years, we went to work every Monday through Friday, oftentimes on Saturday and sometimes Sunday too. We put in our hours, we punched the clock, and we had to listen to people who had risen through the ranks. And in that one place, in that building or on that floor or in that one office, they were the authority. They told you how things were going to be done, when they were going to be done, and didn't have to tell you the whys about much of anything. But because of the fact that automation and AI are coming into play in the workplace, it's actually providing employees with more opportunity, because now you can look for roles in places that you're not geographically bound to in many different fields. So at this point, I think it's relatively fair to say that, you know, there are some fields where you must work on site, but that doesn't apply to the vast majority of jobs that we have right now in our economy. And with that freedom that we have to not be geographically bound, you know, the opportunity to apply for jobs in a global pool of job opportunities, I mean, there's tremendous opportunity, right? So most people right now currently spend more than 1/3, even half of your days working, up to 6 days a week for, gosh, between the ages of 18 and like 67, sometimes even longer than that. And during that time, as employees, you know, when we look at the research, we see that there's a considerable amount of people feeling that they're micromanaged, they're told what to do, that they feel that leaders are sometimes out of touch with what's going on. They're so far removed from the life experiences of people who are on the entry level as compared to people who are at the higher levels. And as a result, there's times when conflict arises. There are times when people don't feel that level of job satisfaction because of these things that are going on in the office, right? There's this feeling of like detachment between the decision makers and the people who are subordinate to them, which leads to disillusionment at times. Even, unfortunately, times where people kind of hold on for too long. They may have been outstanding at what they do, but over time, you know, there's physical and cognitive decline, and people have their whole identities wrapped up in these positions that they have. Without getting up in the morning and putting on that you know, suit and tie, or putting on the business suit and going into the workplace, when this man or woman looks in the mirror, they don't necessarily know who they are without that in their life. But people who are coming up now, the younger generations, they're not looking to build their identity through work. Instead of saying, I want to get a job at this company and work for this many years, and that's who I want to be. I want to be that person in this building for all those years. They're saying, well, I know what I want from my life. I want to travel. I want to experience things. I want to see the world. And my job is something that I'm going to kind of use to be able to do those things. My job is a tool. My job is no longer my sole purpose. So with that in mind, people have tremendous opportunity right now to have a much higher level of job satisfaction because you are able to go out and pursue jobs anywhere in the world, as opposed to feeling like you're stuck in any one specific place because of the field you work in or because of the company you work in. So the things that people are going to be able to do: permanent remote work. Work until your job is done instead of you having to punch the time clock at the end of the day. Be more present and visible for your families. Experience less pressure. Expend less emotional labor having to interact with people in a workplace with whom you may not agree, may not really get along with. You can experience a decreased level of micromanagement because of the use of AI and automation. You can be more fluid in terms of your employment. And if an organization is going to try and fight to intrude on a person's space by saying, well, at this time on these days, you need to be here with your camera on, and we need to see you, and you need to be wearing a suit even though you're in your own home, and things like that, well, people have the ability and the opportunity to get up and find other employment. So to sum it up, the answer is yes. We can have an increased sense of job satisfaction, an improved level of job satisfaction because of the presence of AI and automation. If you're driven and you're disciplined and you can work effectively in a remote setting, you could even accomplish more than you would if you were in a traditional work setting. The trade-off is that those who do not have those characteristics, they don't have the discipline to function with less structure or continue to produce at high levels and high quality, you're going to quickly find yourselves in situations that are going to be challenging until you reskill and develop the ability to do things in the new setting, which AI and automation are going to allow us to work within. So that's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, follow and subscribe. Keiser University rules.
Thank you for journeying with us today on Keiser Voices, the story of success. As we close this chapter, remember, every story has its next page.